Tell them what my uncle told me. My uncle was a master sergeant in the Air Force, and he traveled around the world operating rod and gun clubs for the Air Force. And I told him I was going to be a professional musician. He said, well, I want to tell you, it's one of the hardest jobs in the world. So you're going to have to work your ass off. You're not going to make any money. You're not going to get any appreciation, which is 90% correct. And that's what I tell them, you know, is don't expect a #1 record. I mean, you may get it, but you may have to work 10 years, just like Bruce Hornsby. A baritone player for Tower of Power came up to me one day, Doc, I think his name is, and he said, Leon, how do you get all those people to cut your records? He said, I've had 12 #1 records. Nobody has ever cut any of them but Tower of Power. And I said, well, maybe your lick's too complicated. I don't know. I mean, standards, when you write standards, when you first hear a standard, it sounds just like a shitty little tune, you know. And then you come back and you hear it later, and then you hear it 20 years later. They're different. I was trying, when I wrote Masquerade, I was trying to write a standard. I wrote Song for You. I was trying to write a song that Ray Charles and Frank Sinatra could sing, a blues song that Ray Charles and Frank Sinatra could sing. I mean, I try to write standards. I don't try to write hits. And when I played that, I'd never played it that way before. I never played that intro before. I just, all off the top of my head, I mean, which is the story of my life, really. And basically, I was trying to sing like Bonnie Bramlett. At that time, we was all trying to sing like Bonnie Bramlett. She said she made him sit there and play that 20 times. She listened to it over and over again.
I've been so many places in my life and time. I've sung a lot of songs, I made some bad rhymes. I've acted out my life on stages with 10,000 people watching. Whoa, but we're alone now and I'm singing this song to you.
On this day with Glenn Campbell, and they brought Leon in, and I'll never forget. And Leon panicked. He was sitting there, and Glenn says, "Leon, just play that shit you did in Oklahoma." He says, "They don't know nothing here." So Leon played Leon Russell,
Yeah, right.
and all of a sudden, they don't know nothing. That was his style. That's what they loved. That's what he did from there on. It.
Leon never said boo to anybody, you know. He just come in, play his piano, you know. And so one day he came to work completely drunk. I mean, so drunk. And he went in and he sat down at the piano, and he and who was playing next to him? Don Randy, I think. And everybody, I mean, he was actually talking. He never spoke. And everybody was like coming in, did you see Leon? Did you see Leon? And so everybody was like just looking at him, you know, and he was being really funny too, because I never heard him say a word. So Philip was like totally knocked out, but then finally he wanted the session to begin, you know, and Leon was just doing, you know, all this kind of crazy stuff. And so Philip said, you know, Leon, have you ever heard of the word respect? And Leon jumped up on the table, on the piano, and he said, Philip, have you ever heard of the word you? And everybody, I mean, they couldn't get it together for half an hour. People were like dying on the floor. I mean, tears rolling in the studio, because it's one of those, you know, the weirdest thing you ever saw.
I was playing on one of George Harrison's records one day, and we were in take 168. And I went up to him and said, George, do you want me to play the same thing 168 times, or do you want me to play 168 different things? This just drive me crazy. I didn't like to do that. But some people, I mean, he was overdubbing on my wedding album. I had one of his songs on there. He just played a guitar solo, and it was great. I said, well, that's good. He said, oh, no, that's not quite good. Let me play it again. So he played, I had a 40-track machine, and he played 25 more solos. I kept all of them. We got to the end of solo 25, and I said, well, George, listen to this one, see what you think. I played it, and he said, well, that's great. What is that? And I said, that's number 1.
The whole roster till suddenly in the late 60s, I heard a record by Delaney and Bonnie. And I thought, wow, this guy who plays on this record, he's got everything I like. He's got soul and gospel and kind of bluegrass and everything going. And then I went to see Delaney and Bonnie in England, and I saw him, and he looked like something from outer space. He was pretty amazing. But then he did the Joe Cocker Mad Dogs and Englishmen, and then he really looked like something from outer space. He became the master of space and time, and he wore that hat and those aviator glasses, and he looked like a mean mother. I met him after the show, and not only was he sweet and kind, he gave me a recipe for my voice, which I still use to this day, and he asked me to do some dates with him. And listen, he was my idol. To meet him, I was shaking. For me, he sang, he wrote, and he played just how I wanted to do it. Only recently have I discovered how many people's records he played on. Leon played on Bing Crosby, Johnny Mathis, Doris Day, Dean Martin, Herb Alpert, Frank Sinatra, Strangers in the Night. Da, 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 da. Remember that? The Ventures, the Everly Brothers, Del Shannon, Dwayne Eddy, Bobby V, Bobby Darin, Jan and Dean, Let There Be Drums, Sandy Nelson, that was Leon. The Fleetwoods, Come Softly to Me, that was Leon. Connie Francis, The Crystals, The Ronettes, every Phil Spector record. The Byrds, Mr. Tambourine Man. Delaney and Bonnie, The Beach Boys, every Beach Boys record, including Pet Sounds. J.J. Cale, Harry Nilsson, Bob Dylan, Joe Cocker, Freddie King, and B.B. King, just to name some of them that he played on. I was in Africa, and I was shaving, and I put some music on the iPod, and I pressed Leon Russell, and I started to sob. And that music took me back to one of the greatest times of my life, and I thought, I have to call this person up. He gave me such a wonderful start in my life. He meant so much to me, and I haven't talked to him for so long. So I called him, and I said, would you like to do an album? And he said, sure. Last year in January, Leon and I embarked upon what was one of the greatest years of my life, both musically and personally, because I got to know the man that I never knew. I got to spend time with him in the studio. He was frail when he came in the studio. He had a 5.5-hour brain operation. And suddenly, with the love from the musicians in the studio and all the other peers that came to pay tribute to him, he became stronger. And I said to him, there's one thing I want for you. I want people to acknowledge you for what you've done, to remember you for what you've written, what you've played on, and for you to be proud again of what you've done. And I want you to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And here we are a year later, and he's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And you know, at the end of the year, I phoned him up and said, Leon, it's been a great year. He said, yeah, I got a new bus.
When I was a young man, barely 17, I went out to Hollywood and chased my dream. Dusty Oklahoma was all I'd ever seen, and I was getting older. The memories of the Greyhound will fade and quickly pass in the lonely restaurant windows. An empty hourglass reflects the human hunger for the questions never asked. I only had my time spending